part of society and help people, like they're going to do bad shit with this money. That's hard for me.
Yeah.
And that's why I really do try to vet cases hard, because I don't have the soul for that anymore. I don't want to deal with that. They get hired by the Sackler family and they go to work for these big that are supposed to be there to regulate and protect people. And then they just bankrupt out of that entity and start a new entity, and they're still sitting on all their cash. They're still sitting on all their personal assets, and there's no real liability or consequence for them. I just think that that's where we've gone as a society. And I also think that people are looking for easy money.
Episode 89, Stay Classy Podcast. Here we go. Got Dan Fulkerson in the house. Dan, thanks for coming on the show. How you doing,
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, just to give you a quick intro, but also going to kind of let you tell your own story as we go through the episode. But Dan is a founding partner, correct me if I'm wrong, of the Batta Fulkerson law firm.
Yes, sir.
He is also the founder of Save a Bully. It's a philanthropic foundation that rescues specifically bulldogs? Or?
That's all I know.
Oh, okay.
I know French and English really well, so that's what we focus on.
Okay, and you own 5 dogs yourself, right?
I do. I got 3 Frenchies, 2 English.
And this is Teddy?
This is Teddy Bear. Teddy
All right.
was ditched in a box on a doorstep in 2020.
Oh, that's horrible.
Was super beat up, like had no fur on the front of him, and came to me and rehabbed him, and now he doesn't leave my side. He's like my soul dog.
Well, that's lovely. As I mentioned before, I just getting a taste of dog ownership myself recently, so I feel you on that one. But 5, man, that's a lot.
It's a lot. They come everywhere with me, which makes it a lot easier. I mean, they come to work every day, like so. Because I can do it as a pack, it makes it easier. My office helps take care of them. My staff helps take care of them. So it's not all me. It's
okay.
team.
Well, it's a group effort with dogs always. But you also, I think I'd be remiss in not mentioning that you're also a founding partner in a number of businesses, including Dropkick Coffee. Is that right? Spill the Bean.
Dropkick Coffee, invest in heavily in Spill the Beans. We got another location opening up in Ocean Beach. Had a meal prep company that we sold. I have.
What was the name of that?
So it was Preppy's meal prep company, and had Poke Vita, which was a restaurant downtown we sold. Have investments in a bunch of different restaurants, Coco Maya, the Remy. Just I like to get my hands in
just like a couple of the other guests we've had on recently. You got your hand in a number of different hats. And we'll get to some of those different aspects. Like we will talk about the law stuff a lot, but I also want to touch on the business stuff as well, and some of the sort of the voice I feel like you've been in the San Diego community on a lot of issues. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is a question that I was just thinking of actually in a conversation that you and I had off the record recently. And it was as a conversation we were sort of having about sort of barriers that are sort of implicitly built into our legal system. What I mean by that is, if someone gets named in a lawsuit, let's say, and you deal with this kind of stuff all the time, not specifically this exact type of case, but cases similar to this. If someone gets named in a lawsuit that really has no merit, they go to court, they pay a lawyer, get that case dismissed against them. Maybe it runs them $10,000 to $20,000
or more.
And that got me thinking. That little conversation we were having about that specific case got me thinking about a bigger issue, which is something I'm sure you think about a lot, which is, are we overly reliant in society in terms of like, it seems like we take the complexity of law sort of for granted in this country.
For sure.
The law is so complex, like I can't understand it. Like we just kind of throw our hands up and just all acknowledge that, the people who aren't lawyers. And so we just immediately run to lawyers at a moment's notice when a problem comes up. And again, you have to pay extraordinary amounts of money just to even get a case against you dismissed. Like, is it a problem in your opinion how reliant we are on lawyers as a society in terms of like taking the complexity of the law for granted? And does that legal structure then implicitly favor those who have the means to get things like little cases against them dismissed, like motions, that kind of thing? And even like some criminal matters, I feel like this applies to. Is there sort of just an implicit like power structure there that favors like certain people over others? Is that a problem in your opinion? Is this something you think about?
Yes, and yes, it 100% is. And I think that the system should be changed. I think that the loser should pay. That's how I think it should work. If you bring a frivolous ass lawsuit and you lose, you should have to pay for the other side's costs, for the other side's attorney's fees. And I think that you would see a huge decrease in frivolous lawsuits. I think people would be very careful before they ever filed suit, whereas now people with money will just file suit, and they'll do it as a power play, and they'll do it as a power move. And if they have more resources and more cash than you do, they can drown you in litigation to the point where even if you did nothing wrong, you lose because they will bankrupt you on just straight litigation fees. A lot of these cases cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and can get into the millions of dollars to just defend yourself on a case. And again, even if you didn't do anything wrong, it can break you.
So these legal wars of attrition, I'm thinking about, I just was thinking about Ulysses S. Grant waging a war of attrition against the Confederates at the end of the Civil War and just kind of slowly draining them down. That seems kind of an analogy for what's happening in our legal system with
exactly right.
sort of the rich and powerful just using the very threat of a lawsuit as a weapon to get their way because they know they can win that war of attrition. So, I mean, is there a clear alternative that's like worked elsewhere that we could like emulate for moving away from that system? Or is this like something that's very, very specific to us that we have to figure out something new for?
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you look around the world, our legal system is still probably one of the most fair and just if you look around the world. I'm sure there are other countries that have things that are more dialed, but then they also have flaws that we do not have. I do think that the biggest, if you're going to just generalize it, the easiest solution is to do a loser pays system, like where if you bring a case, you're going to be responsible for those costs if you do not prevail and win. And I think that just simply doing that would change the entire system. Now, when you get into the criminal defense game, it's a different story, right? Because there is a power struggle there. And the fact is if you have money, you're probably not going to get the same consequence as someone who does not.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different story.
Sure.
But when it comes to civil cases, like what you and I were talking about, that's the answer.
Yeah, so it's almost like what you're proposing is essentially that we do what they do in a lot of major sports, right? Like Major League Baseball and NFL, where it's like if you challenge and you lose the challenge,
100%.
you lose your challenge, right?
There's a consequence.
Yeah, there's a consequence.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting idea that you're floating here, and I'm trying to think of what the pushback to that be. I guess some people would probably say like, hey, that would de-incentivize people from sometimes seeking legitimate civil
Well, I can
recourse.
tell you what the pushback is.
Yeah, go ahead.
The biggest lobbyist group in this country are lawyers. That's the biggest
Is it like a
lobbyist
specific group of firms or just like lawyers
it's a
everywhere?
lawyer lobby, right?
Okay.
And so, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of different firms that are involved, but it's just a lawyer lobby. And that is the biggest lobbyist group that you have in the United States of America. That's bigger than Big Pharma. That's bigger than...
Wow, really?
Yeah, even bigger than like, the defense industrial complex. Like the lawyer lobby is huge. And so they thrive off of litigation. They thrive off of frivolous lawsuits. They thrive off of that stuff. And that's why lawyers have such a bad reputation. Like my entire career, I've tried to break the reputation of a normal lawyer. I don't dress like a normal lawyer. I don't act like a normal lawyer. You come into my office, it is not a normal law firm. And that's all done intentionally because I don't like the way that the game is set up. I don't like that it's always been this old white man's club for so long. Like there's a lot of things about it that I think need to change.
Sure.
And one of the things that I think should change is the setup overall in civil cases, where I do think the loser should pay, and I do think the lawyer lobby group has way too much power over Congress and over the Senate, and unfortunately we see the result of that in this country.
Yeah, well, I think there's a whole other conversation about if that's even possible to break. But like in researching like some questions for this interview, I was thinking about like this just idea of frivolous lawsuits in our country and sort of the perception that we sort of give life to lawsuits that probably we could argue wouldn't necessarily have a chance in other societies, other legal structures. And then the kind of the pushback that I was reading online to this notion of frivolous lawsuits was basically that, well, that's not entirely true, that actually like a lot of these cases have declined in recent years, that there's kind of been some specific reforms like damage malpractice caps, other tort reforms to sort of ease, to sort of slow the momentum of those frivolous lawsuits going too crazy. It's interesting too, because a lot of those articles that were like, hey, this isn't such a big deal, were written by law firms. I started to read online. But that being said, are they right that those kinds of civil cases have declined in recent years and that those kind of reforms have like limited the problem, or is that just bullshit?
Those reforms help insurance companies.
Okay.
That's what those reforms do. And that's why those articles are written by attorneys who probably are getting business and money from insurance companies. Malpractice caps, it's the biggest joke of all time to me. Like, I don't do medical malpractice, but medical malpractice in California, it's really hard to find a good medical malpractice attorney. Why? Because you have a cap on your general damages, meaning that you have $250,000 that you can recover for your general damages if something happens to you. So a doctor goes in, you're supposed to have your right leg amputated. They remove your left leg. They're capped at $250,000 they can recover for moving your wrong leg. You can get your medical specials, so you can get your medical stuff paid, but for your pain and suffering, you get 250 grand. They took your leg, here's 250 grand. They kill you, 250 grand. It's a joke. $250,000 is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money when you're talking about your health, your life, and moving forward. Other states don't have that cap. California does. I think it's absolutely ludicrous. I think that you let doctors get away with stuff that they shouldn't get away with. I come from a family of doctors. I think medical malpractice is running rampant in California, and a big part of that reason is there's a lack of consequence because of those caps. Other states have caps on personal injury. I have a practice in Idaho, so I have a practice in Boise, Idaho. They have a $320,000 cap, I believe is what it's raised to this year, for pain and suffering. So you get hit by a semi-truck and have every bone in your body shattered, you get $320,000 to your pocket for pain and suffering, yet you're in pain for the rest of your life. To me, that's not fair. That doesn't protect individuals. That protects insurance companies and big business. That's a problem.
Enjoying this episode? Subscribe for more content on finding your own path to success. Every subscriber makes a huge difference to the pod, and we're grateful for everyone. And don't forget to throw us a classy like and comment too to let YouTube know that you're a fan of our stuff. Now back to your regularly scheduled podcasting.
Okay, so that answers that part of the question. I was also thinking as I was doing this research, and I believe the article was written by Columbia Law or something, but the source aside, just like thinking about like the idea here is they were saying that like with obviously everyone knows about like or a lot of people know about I think it was 1997, the McDonald's coffee spilled on the woman's lap, and she got like $3 million in damages or something.
Spilled on her vagina. People leave that part out. A burnt vagina, all $3 million seems like a pretty fair day, but you know.
Well, yeah, that's an important piece to this, right? Is like, you know, sometimes we sort of forget like the exact details of the story and sort of remember the myth, as it were.
Exactly.
I feel like that's another conversation. But as to the story itself, like the article written by Columbia Law was essentially, the author was essentially arguing that, hey, like, you know, cases like that, the media is like sensationalized to the point where people think that we have this problem of frivolous lawsuits when we really don't, when these cases are really statistically going down. I mean, is that just like empirically true that the cases have gone down? Because it seems like the perception I get, and from talking to lawyers like yourself, is that frivolous lawsuits are alive and well. So,
yeah.
like, is that just complete BS on their part, or is it more of the fact that the damage has already been done? It's kind of created this chilling effect that carries over today.
So I can't speak to the statistics on a macro level, right? Okay. I haven't looked at them, but I can tell you, just being in the game every single day, it has not gone down. And a lot of firms take on frivolous cases. I am lucky that I'm in a position where I'm very busy, so I vet cases very hard, and if I think it's bullshit, or if I think you're a bullshit person or not a nice human, I'm not taking your case. I don't care how much money it's worth. It's just not worth my time. But there are a lot of firms, a lot of like the bus bench, you know, the big advertising firms that'll take every case that walks in their door. Yeah. And I think that there is a problem in that, and I do think that there needs to be some regulation to help dissuade people from bringing bullshit cases.
Okay. Yeah, kind of nipping it in the bud, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like that's a problem in society. You are going to see a increase insurance premiums because of bullshit litigation that shouldn't be there. You're going to see, you know, lives that are impacted when they shouldn't be because of bullshit litigation. Like, I've watched it myself in my personal life. I've watched how it can affect people, and it's really sad because people do not realize how expensive the court system is. When I go try a case, and I'm only trying a case if I'm asking for millions of dollars, but our last trial, we spent, I think it was $256,000 on that case getting through trial. That's money out of my own pocket that I'm risking. Now, when you're asking for $3 or $4 million on a horrific injury case, it makes sense to do it. But most people don't have $256,000 to come up with to get through trial.
Yeah. So, like, just the very like thread of this that we're kind of talking about, like with frivolous lawsuits, and specifically also with the rich and powerful using the threat of these lawsuits to get what they want. Like, do you feel like all this combined is it fair to say, has a chilling effect, not just on, I feel like in the workplace it's very acute, right? Just like in professional life, everything that you have to sign, all the placards around the buildings in these corporate offices, but also just like day-to-day interaction between like employees and also just everyday life. It seems like we live in a time where there's like this sort of culture of fear and mistrust of, if I do this, you could sue me. If I say the wrong thing, like it's harassment. If I do this, like, is that perception like real to you in terms of like it's grounded in like the way the legal system is actually operating, or do you think that's perception is a little divorced from the reality of what's going on?
I think every state's a little different. I think California is a very litigious state because of its laws and because of the structure and how that they've written a lot of employee codes and things like that.
Yeah.
For example, being a business owner in California, good luck to you. Like, it's hard to meet all of the rules and regulations. It's hard to avoid a lawsuit if an employee wants to sue you. I mean, I have my employment attorney, and I try to do everything, dot every I, cross every T. And he's like, listen, man, if someone wants to bring a suit against you, it's going to cost you a solid $30,000 with me just to get out of it. Like, you're better off when you relieve an employee, you're going to fire them. They're going to quit even. Pay them $500, have them sign a severance agreement. I'm like, if they quit, you want me to pay them $500 if they quit? And they're like, he's like, yeah, it's worth your headache to just get it done.
Pretty easy investment.
100%. So I do that with every single person now, just because that's the advice of my counsel. But there are so many businesses that have been taken advantage of by California laws that you just can't meet. I have a buddy that owns it's now 400 locations, and they're throughout the country, but he probably has, let's say, 20 locations of one business. And I'm not going to say the business on camera, throughout California. He got hit with a $350,000 suit that he had to settle for $350,000 for the time it took for his employees from when they unlocked the front door of his business to walk 3 feet in to clock in on the computer. They filed a suit against him that he settled for $350,000 for that 20 seconds that it was from when you turn the key to clock in, because they weren't getting paid for that 20 seconds till they got clocked in on the computer.
So just to be clear, the $350,000 was so did he make that settlement because going forward could have resulted in a trial that he might have lost, or was it just like nipping this in the bud, or what?
It was a wage and hour dispute. There's certain damages where you can get like 3 times compensatory damages and 3 like attorney's fees, and he could have gotten hit for like $750,000. So his lawyers told him settle the case for $350,000. And again, when you think of it on a common sense, that's bullshit. Like you unlock a door, you walk up, and you're clocked in 20 seconds later. Per California law, he was not compliant.
Wow. Well, I mean, there's obviously loopholes in the law. That's a regulatory problem. That's a state lawmaker problem, and a host of other issues. But there also have to be like lawyers with bad incentives, bad motivations, like sort of these sharks in the water to take these cases and to file these cases. So like from that perspective, I mean, is there something that we can do, or something that's already being done in other places to sort of discourage like these lawyer sharks from taking those kind of cases? It's like, we can find this loophole, we can take this guy down for $350,000. Like, is there a way to like nip that in the bud?
It should be the state bar. The state bar of California is supposed to be regulating attorneys and regulating attorney actions. You see a lot of it with ADA lawyers. In my opinion, they're pieces of shit. We opened up Smoking Gun downtown before we were open. No public in restaurant. We're literally in the process of opening. Not a soft open, no public in restaurant. We get hit with an ADA lawsuit because our table height wasn't high enough. I'm like, how? You rolled by in a car and looked inside the restaurant, and then you bring this ADA lawsuit? I call my attorney. He's like, settle it. I'm like, they want $3,000. He's like, you know how much you're going to pay to fight it? He's like, just settle it. I'm like, it's fucking bullshit.
Did they even talk
though.
to you before it about it, or they just went ahead and filed?
We just went and filed.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and there are these firms, and you can look them up because you can look up all of the cases they filed. They just go restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, and they do the same exact thing. To me, that's bullshit. The bar should step in, and they should tell them like that you are not using your license the way that we're regulating you to use your license. You can't do shit like this. But the bar has been very lax for a long time. A lot of people now have caught on to it with the Thomas Girardi scandal in LA. He was literally stealing millions of dollars from his client trust account. Millions of dollars. And no one did anything. And turns off he was paying off people at the bar to be able to get away with it for a long time. Yeah. Wow. And there's a lot of lawyers that do that. I know lawyers in San Diego that They float their lives by stealing their money from the client trust account. And I personally know this, and I've personally gone to the bar on one of these lawyers, and they didn't do shit. And I'm just like, what are you even there for?
Yeah.
What are you even there for?
Did you subscribe yet? If you like our content, it's the easiest way to support the pod. Hit the subscribe button on the bottom right and keep it classy.
It seems like at some point, right, like even aside from the bar, just like the reputation of these lawyers and these firms would suffer over a given amount of time. I mean, like, and I'm also thinking like maybe there's a role for media, for the press to like get a hold of stories like these and bring this more to light. Like, it seems like there should be some sort of public censure in situations like this.
But they know they never come to light because it's a Ponzi scheme, right? So I have a client trust account. All the money that I settle for my clients goes in this client trust account that's supposed to be regulated by the bar. Right now, I probably have $3.5 million sitting in my client trust account right now that's for my clients. Why? Because I'm working on reducing bills, things like that. And then my clients get paid out of the trust account. I get paid out of the trust account, and all the doctors and providers get paid out of the trust account. Well, you don't get a tick on the bar's radar unless your trust account hits zero. So what these shady, scandalous criminal and lawyers do is they'll use their client trust account, get it down to $100,000, but then when the next case settles, they replenish it and pay off the old client. So stealing from Peter to pay Paul. It's a Ponzi scheme, but it never gets on the bar's radar unless it ticks to zero. So that's what Girardi was doing. He was just using his client trust account, floating his life, buying his planes, buying his cars, and they never picked up on it until it got really bad.
Yeah, Tom Girardi, and he's in prison now, right? Or
yeah, he just got convicted, I think, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago.
Okay, yeah. So I want to ask like a related question, which is we've kind of been talking about the standpoint of personal injury law because obviously that's what you practice. It makes sense to talk about it. But I want to talk about a related field of law, but slightly separate. But I think you're going to have insights on this too, which is like, specifically corporate law. So with in terms of corporate law, it's interesting. A couple years ago, I was reading this book that you've probably heard of, Empire of Pain. Yeah. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but essentially about the opioid epidemic, about the Sackler dynasty, how that got started, Purdue Pharma, and there was a whole section of the book that I almost like couldn't finish because it was, as I recall, it was essentially like this whole part where Purdue Pharma is filing like injunction after injunction, like to delay the process of these cases by people representing victims to go against the pharmaceutical giants, essentially exploiting every legal loophole in the book because they have unlimited resources to stop them from ever really seeing any real light of day, any real consequences. And that got me thinking at the time, and I think about it still to this day, is our legal system just irretrievably like rigged in the sense that corporate giants like Purdue Pharma, they really can avoid any immediate legal tangible consequences. And the second question related to that is there any like alternative or specific reform to amend that? If so, or is there like sort of a way to fix it from within, or is it just like would it need just a complete reset?
It's a deep question. I think there's multiple problems, and there's a great documentary on Hulu. It's not a documentary, but it's a great show on Hulu called Dope Sick that goes into all that as well. It's fantastic. The opioid epidemic in the Sackler family, that situation showed, I think, and shined a light on something that's been a big problem in this country that I do think you can solve. And that is you have all these ex-heads of all these government entities, right? So the FDA and all these government entities that are supposed to be there to regulate and protect people. Well, what happens to these people as soon as they leave the public sector? What happens when they leave their government position? They get hired by the Sackler family and they go to work for these big, corporate entities. And they are literally going from, I'm regulating you, my job is to make sure that you're doing things right, to now I work for you and my job is to make sure that I keep you out of trouble. And that's a problem. Like there's no one that can argue with me and convince me otherwise that that's okay. You're going to have a huge conflict of interest and you're going to have a lot of shadiness when you have a setup like that. So I think that's a big issue. And that's an easily correctable thing of saying, hey, for a 5-year period, it's almost like a non-compete. Once you leave this position, you're not going to go work in this industry for a private company for this period of time. I think
would that be like a federal thing, or?
Yeah, I think that's something that the federal government, Congress, and the states, they could come and they could pass. And I think that that's something that they really should think about doing, because I think that that will cut down on a ton of corruption. Now, the other thing that you asked about was corporate protections, because a lot of times there's corporate shields, meaning that if you start a corporation and you do it the right way, your personal assets, your personal gains are not liable if the corporation were to get hit, sued, shut down. There is a corporate protection there. Now, there are ways to pierce that corporate protection. In law, we call it piercing the corporate veil, but it's very, very difficult to do. And so a lot of these individuals can stand behind these corporate entities. These corporate entities can do horrible, shady shit, get sued, hit with judgments, and then they just bankrupt out of that entity and start a new entity, and they're still sitting on all their cash. They're still sitting on all their personal assets, and there's no real liability or consequence for them other than having a good team of corporate attorneys that goes, okay, it's time to cut the cord. Now let's bankrupt this one and start another one. And you saw a lot of this with the PPP loans in the United States when that was all going down during the pandemic, where people would have a corporate entity that would apply for a PPP loan. They'd get that money, 250, 350, sometimes more. They'd spend that money on a bunch of bullshit. They'd bankrupt that corporate entity, and then they'd start another one, and they just basically pocketed all that PPP money. And there was no consequence for it. And so there are things that could be done to change those kind of legal protections, and they probably should be. Now, will they be? I don't know, because unfortunately the people that run this country, and I'm a person, I think both parties are absolute dog shit. I'll say that from day one. I think that the two-party system is very broken. I think we have a very corrupt government. I don't trust the government. I am one of those people, call me whatever you want to call me, but I read a lot, I do a lot of research, and I'm pretty informed on it, so I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone that wants to talk about it. But I don't know if it will happen, because unfortunately the people that run this country are the people that profit off of those systems. And
incentives.
That's why you still see insider trading with the Senate and Congress, which is just absolutely insane to me, that we all know, like, oh, Nancy Pelosi's a better trader than Warren Buffett, but we're all okay with it. Okay.
Yeah, that's funny. That was the example I was going to literally use to engage with your point that you just made about, the idea that maybe we should have this like 5-year or whatever moratorium between somebody leaving public service, like bureaucracy, and then going to the private sector in that same industry. I was going to just compare that to, seems like pretty common sense. Seems also pretty common sense that, like, members of Congress maybe shouldn't be able to trade stocks, or at least maybe not in the way that you and I do.
100%.
But it seems like one of those reforms that is like really sound in theory, but just will probably not happen in the foreseeable future.
No, because it's greed, and that is how
people in power have no incentive to let that happen.
1,000%.
So another thing that I was going to ask you is, there was another point you made in terms of corporate law, but I was just going to ask, like, with corporate law, it's interesting. A friend of mine a long time ago in college, well, I guess not that long ago for me, it was like 8 years ago now, but he was telling me that he was interested in going to corporate law, and then he was discouraged. And I asked him, why didn't you pursue that? And he said, well, he did an legal internship, and his corporate boss at the firm told him a story about a man who essentially was injured in a construction accident. And that guy's boss at the time told him, hey, like, we're gonna go after this guy. We're not gonna let him have his damages. We're gonna, hammer him to the end, get him to drop his case. And he felt discouraged by it. He was like, man, this poor, like, I think like immigrant, like worker can't even get like basic damages for his facial burns, for these life altering injuries. And just because of like corporate greed, and that kind of discouraged him from pursuing that route at the time. And I was thinking, like, when you went into law and when you decided on the field of law you're in now, what kind of like motivated you to get into specific personal injury law and to do it the way you do? Like, what were the kind of the motivations and like the kind of the mindset that you had going in, and how do you sort of try to do it differently from other people?
So I can tell you exactly my setup. I went to law school because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I did my master's in business at the same exact time, and it was because I came from Boise, Idaho, from a little small farm town outside of Boise. I had nothing. I was working at Stingery nightclub as a valet just to like survive. I was broke, living with 6 roommates, living off ramen noodles. And I was like, I need to do something so I'm not poor for the rest of my life. And so that's why I did my MBA in my law. I got an internship in law school at the U.S. Attorney's Office, thought I'd love it. They put me on a case that was prosecuting basically a legal medical marijuana dispensary that was operating legally under California law, but it is still federally illegal. So I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is the federal prosecutor, and we were going in and destroying these dispensaries, even though they'd done everything to be compliant with California law, going in and seizing cars, seizing homes, seizing money, and I couldn't do it. I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, these people are not criminals. They're doing everything to be compliant with the law. And because the feds, still have a hard on for weed, they're going to go ruin people's lives. I didn't last long. I bounced. Went to a corporate firm. It was all paperwork. You never have any human interaction. It's all, you're propping up big business. Wasn't for me. Bounced as well. Went personal injury immediately, had human interaction with real humans that have had their lives turned upside down. And I'm like, I get to actually help people. Like, every day I get to help people, good people that, really truly need my help. And I was done from day one. Like, that was it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and absolutely loved it. And I was the guy that when I was in law school trying to figure out what I was going to do, I'd ask, like, do I have to work weekends? Because if I have to work weekends, it's probably not for me. Like, I wanted a cush gig. I work 7 days a week now, and I have for 15 years because I love what I do, and no one's forced me to go to work. It's my business, but I go to work every single day with a smile on my face because I love being able to do what I do. So I'm very lucky that I found what I'm supposed to do and what I was put on earth to do. But I also was lucky that, and I'm not going to name names, but I worked for a firm that didn't do things the way that I thought it should be done. Like, there was a lot of things that I saw that it was like, this is not okay. Like, you're cutting corners that you should not cut. You're doing things that you should not do. And once I saw a couple big red flags, it was time to leave. And it was a great experience for me because I literally got to see how I didn't want to do something and how I didn't want to run a personal injury firm and then go and create the model that I wanted to create. And me and my law partner, Paul, we literally just broke everything. We're like, okay, here's the traditional way that you're supposed to do it. Let's break the shit out of it. And then let's rebuild it how we want to. And it has been a game changer. And one of the reasons why, in an 8-year period, we become one of the top firms in Southern California. I mean, we have 11 attorneys now and a 40-person staff and 3 offices and in 2 different states. And we've collected over $30 million this year just for our clients. And I tell that to people and they're like, how the hell did you do it? And I'm like, we've just done it different. And it's much more of a people first model. And what I mean by that is I will never take $1 more than what my clients put in their pocket, ever, no matter what. I'm not going to be the lawyer that takes a big pile and leaves a client with the short end of the stick. If I get a horrible, horrific injury case and there's only a $15,000 policy, because that's what's mandated by the state of California is $15,000. A lot of people don't know that. It's been that way since like 1972. They haven't raised it. But if you lose your leg and there's $15,000 there, I'm going to be an asshole if I take any money on the case. So I'll work that case, put in all the hours, do all the work, and then I give that money back to the person. I just wave it and give it back. It's karma. It's good energy. It comes back around. We also put a piece of every single dollar that we bill or that we bring in into a pot, and it's a community pot. We help out local nonprofits with that. So as we grew, it grew. Now we help out over 20 different nonprofits. I sit on 6 different, charity boards. That's a really big part of my life. So it has been a very community first approach. I'm also never going to be the guy with the billboard that says, hope you're injured, call me today. I hope you're not. I hope you don't call me today. Like, I have other ways that I can make money. I have other businesses. I don't want to help people that get screwed up in accidents, but I do it because I don't want you going to the shady guy down the street that's going to take advantage of you, that's going to settle your case for 10 cents on the dollar when it's worth a hell of a lot more, but they don't want to put in the time. So that's why I do it. That's how I built my firm. And I think that that's been our reputation, and that's more important to me than anything else. And so it's a different setup. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you had me thinking, and I'm not going to, excuse me. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just it made me think of a time a few years ago when I was working for a major news outlet, and I'm not going to name them, but essentially the situation was similar to what you described as like the sort of the first firms that you worked with, where I was working in a situation where I just plainly didn't feel comfortable with some of the ways, it was an investigative news company, and some of the ways that we were going about it and doing it felt dishonest, exploitive. Like we were sort of like, catching people with their pants down with the stories that we were doing. So I didn't really like that. Also didn't really like my boss at the time. That's a whole nother thing. But that kind of gave me this idea in mind that if I ever am in that position to lead that kind of group, I'm going to do a little differently. And it seems like you've sort of done that now with this community-oriented approach. Now, what I'm thinking about is like, are there times like, and have you ever had cases that you've taken initially that in your mind, I'm curious, just like created maybe some kind of conflict between what your duty as like the lawyer and like your client obligations were and your own moral convictions? How do you deal with that? Or do you just never ever put yourself in those positions to begin with?
So I vet every case myself. So I meet with every client when they come in the door. So if it's not a case that fact pattern wise I'm comfortable with, I just don't take it. But I have had situations where my rule is no assholes. Like I don't want to deal with people that are rude, people that are disrespectful. But sometimes people put on a good face and you don't realize who they really are. Yeah. And then you're a year and a half in and like, you're kind of you're a really shitty person. You're not a nice human. Yeah. And it's a struggle because my job is to go out and get you the best result possible. It doesn't matter what kind of person you are. That's my job. And I will do that. And I do that. But when you're laying in bed at night and you're going, man, like this person, they're going to do bad things with this money. Like they're not going to go be a productive part of society and help people. Like they're going to do bad shit with this money. That's hard for me. Yeah. And that's why I really do try to vet cases hard because I don't have the soul for that anymore. I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I feel you there. Now, I was also thinking about like just, and this is a very high level like a question compared to some of the specific stuff we were talking about. So I don't know if you ever read this book. It's called The World Until Yesterday by Jared Diamond. Same guy who wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel. But essentially like the main thesis of the book, just to sum it up, is he basically argues that in conflict resolution, in terms of like our legal system, and he's not just talking America, he's talking about like Western democracies as a whole, we sort of fixate too narrowly, in his opinion, on resolving problems through the parameters of the legal system. And he talks more about like traditional societies and sort of the communal resolution and negotiation and like sort of the idea of like restoration and reconciliation.
For sure.
And I'm curious, like, I'm sure this is something you've thought about at some point. Like, do you believe that specifically, I mean, obviously we can't speak for every other Western democracy, but specifically in our society that we are too, with litigation and the civil process, like, are we too focused on let's take this to the courts instead of like sort of this more traditional like communal let's have healing, let's have reconciliation? Like, do we just sort of like forget about that altogether, or is that something where you feel like that's just not realistic the way that our society works in 2024?
I think our society is conflict driven. Right? Like, I just think that's, if you look at society, it's pretty conflict driven. And so when you turn on the TV and you're watching Suits and then followed by Law and Order and it's programming. Like, people get programmed by what they're seeing in society and by the way the society's made up. And so that's their default. It's not love and human and let's work this out and people make mistakes and how can we settle this amongst ourselves? It's gone away from that. And it was even more so that when we were growing up. Like, I'm 40 this year. I don't know how old you are, but we're close. Yeah. So when I was growing up, like we'd fight. Like, we had fight clubs after school, right? Like, that was just normal. And now I get calls from parents that are like, this kid punched my kid in the nose. I want to sue his parents. I'm like, he got punched in the nose. Like, this is what happens when kids are growing up. Like, wipe it off, keep moving. Like, what are we doing here? And I just think that that's where we've gone as a society. And I also think that people are looking for easy money. And I think that's a big part of social media, where it's like people are constantly looking at over the fence, playing the Joneses game, and they want quick, easy money. And they think that that's out there. And in my opinion and belief, good things come from hard work and grinding and sacrifice and doing more than the person next to you and being willing to like actually like claw and fight for what you want, not a quick, easy payday. And I don't think that a lot of people, especially younger generations that have come up with just social media, are built that way. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, just to clarify, like when I asked that question, I don't want it to come off someone's like, oh, like, is he really like proposing that we go back to like 3,000 years ago with like tribal legal system? Yeah. That's not what I'm saying at all. But just to be clear, like, I understand also that it's really unlikely, if not impossible, that we would ever revert to something like that. But I do wonder if there's like lessons to be learned from studying older societies in terms of like, are there actually practical things that we could do as a society legally to encourage more amicable conflict resolution instead of like, oh, like somebody hit my car, like I'm taking them to court, like kind of slowing that
So mandatory
down.
mediation.
Yeah.
Before you file a lawsuit, it's mandated mediation. You got to go sit in the room with another person and at least try to work through it. If you don't do that, then okay, you're on to your next step.
Sure.
But things like that,
Yeah.
like work it out.
Is that mandatory in California, by the way? Or?
No, so not pre-litigation by any means. A lot of times in litigation, in court cases, before you get to a trial, before you're in a trial with a jury and you're stuck there for a week to two, the judge will say you guys need to go to mediation. Now you can tell them, no, we're not going.
Yeah.
You're going to lose favor with the judge. It's a really stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
So everyone goes. But a lot of times you're that deep in. This is like a month before trial. You've already spent your $150,000. Like you've been in this for 3 years of your life. Most people are so deep into it then that it doesn't necessarily resolve. Where I think if you did it early on, before everyone's spending a bunch of money, before you're 3 years of your life into it, I think that you'd have a lot better result.
Hey there, classy viewers. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We're dedicated to providing you with quality content that inspires and brightens your day. But keeping it classy can be expensive. If you enjoy our content, we're asking for your support for the podcast using the donation link in the description below. Donations mean the world to us, and even as little as $5 can make a huge difference in helping us make this podcast a reality. Plus, donors are added to our shortlist to be the first to receive exclusive offers on merch, extra content, and even chances to appear on the pod. Anything you can give would truly be appreciated. Now get back to enjoying the rest of the podcast, and as always, stay classy.
Okay, interesting. And I'm so like mediation is a big thing, but in general, do you just feel like going back to kind of what you're talking about with like sort of this conflict-driven society and like how social media amplifies that dynamic? Legal stuff aside, I mean, like what are your thoughts on like what the way that we as people, like as groups of people, socially can push back in terms of like sort of the conflict-driven nature of our society, where we sort of seem to thrive off of these like dumpster fires? Like what is like that, and like is there something tangible that we can like do as human beings, like not just like broad level like philosophical, but like tangible, something that we can do to like push back against that like on a day-to-day basis, other than just deleting Instagram? Like
Yeah,
I mean,
right. That's a really tough question. I think that we've lost a lot of the human element in our society, and I'm not an overly religious type of person, but I think that you've taken God out of society, you've taken religion out of society in a big way. I think that a lot of people need that, and I think that those, whether you want to call them control systems or structure systems, are important in a society. I think that that's been removed. I think that you're seeing a lot of friction. I've noticed a lot of friction in our society that's growing over the last 5 years, especially since the pandemic.
Yeah.
You're pitting people against each other, which is a whole nother conversation. I think that there is an intention to that. I think that there's a plan to pit people against each other. Divide and conquer is something that's been around for a very long time. And the people that run this country and run the world realize that it's a lot easier to control us if we're fighting each other. And so I do think that there's a lot of intention behind the friction and the buildup and what's been going on. And I don't have an answer for how to backtrack that other than awareness.
Yeah.
Once you become aware of those kind of things, it's easier to see and easier to go, I'm not going to engage. I understand you're, I always say, you put a bunch of ants in a jar and you shake the jar and the ants start fighting. And the question should not be, why are the ants fighting? It should be, who's shaking the jar? And I think that a lot of people miss that. And so I've tried to step back from it and do a lot of historical research and gone, oh, this is how societies are controlled. These are how societies are manipulated. The playbook doesn't usually change over time. It's usually pretty consistent. And once you do that, you can start to see it from a different level and you can start to pull yourself out of that.
Sure.
But are enough people going to do that? No, because it takes time and it takes effort and energy to read a book and to look into history and to be self-analytical, and a lot of people just don't have that in them.
Yeah. Sorry, something you said earlier was just making me think of, you ever seen the movie Joker with Joaquin Phoenix? Yeah, so made me think of this line that Joaquin Phoenix has in the movie where he, I think his therapist is asking him something near the beginning of the film. He says, have you noticed that everything is getting crazier out there? And then later on in the monologue that he gives before he kills the TV host, whose name I can't remember, but it's Leonardo DiCaprio's character, or not, it's Robert De Niro's character. Before he kills the guy, he says, he's sort of giving this monologue, and it's supposed to be directed at the TV audience in the movie, but it's really directed at us, right? Where he's saying like, no one's civil anymore. Everybody yells and screams, like basically everyone is awful. Like everything's getting worse. And it kind of seems like the movies, like writers, directors, like the message is sort of directed at us as though like, and the film I think you're supposed to think it's happening in like the 80s or 90s or something, but I think it's really like the message is for the present day, right?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about that while you were talking. I was thinking about like just this sense of we talk about it on the show all the time, but the loss of basic civility that used to be assumed. We talk about like the divisiveness. We talk about this conflict-driven society, and what I'm thinking about is like for you. And I know that you speak out a lot on your Instagram, and you're very open about your political beliefs.
I talk a lot of shit.
Yeah, but which we don't necessarily have to agree on everything. But I feel like I'm hearing a lot of that from you, which is just that there's a lot of those basic things that just were like, let's just get that back before we like move on and fix some of these larger problems. Let's get just that basic decorum back. Is that kind of like where the angle you're coming from?
Yeah, we're all human beings. We're all in this human experience together. It doesn't matter if I disagree with you. You and I can sit here and have a 2-hour long political conversation about all the things that people get all hot and hostile about and all upset. And I can leave here and shake your hand and say, hey, let's do lunch soon. And even if we disagree on every single topic, I'm still cool. Yeah. You're still good. Like, that's how it should be. That's how it used to be. Like, that kind of discourse was what this country was founded on. And now you're watching people lose friends and family members over Trump Harris. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, it's so crazy to me. And it's part of the game. I do think that there's an intention behind it. I do think that there's a plan behind it. And you watched it during the pandemic where you had people turning on each other and, I wish you a winter of death. And like what are we doing? Yeah. Like it's crazy.
It's dystopian almost.
It is. Yeah. It is. And if you can pull yourself out of it and look at it, you realize that you're like, whoa, how do we get here? Like this isn't what this country was. This country is built off love, and this country is built off, love for the country and love for your neighbors and treating people the right way. And we've gone away from that. And that's why I have serious concerns about the future. I always want to say the future is bright, but I do have serious concerns just as the society dissolves and devolves into that, where it's hate and it's I'm right, you're wrong, and how could you ever think that? You're an idiot. Like it's just not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned earlier, and you don't have to be like religious to acknowledge that for a long time, like religious beliefs and type values did underpin society for a long time in Western democracies. And so with that sort of going away, or not going away completely, but being like sort of going to the back of the queue, like, it seems like there's a sense that I get that, okay, we're waiting for something to like replace that, and it's not happening. Yeah. And the clock's ticking, and things are getting worse and worse with the tribalism. So
for sure.
So what I'm thinking about is like for you, and I'm not asking you to explain and defend every single political opinion that you've ever voiced, but like for you, like sort of what are some of the value structures that for you like underpin your own political beliefs, like in terms of how you talk about things, how you talk about what's at stake. I'm sure some of those beliefs also underpin the way you conduct your legal practice and your philanthropy. So what are some of those beliefs? What are some of those values? And how do you think like beyond yourself, like that can be, I don't want to say like universalized, but sort of what we can all kind of like share and participate in that?
So I'll give you my macro and my micro.
Sure.
Okay. And I'll try to do it as concise as possible. My macro is the government is not there to help you. The government is not there to save you. The government should have as little activity in your life as possible. You don't need government involvement. You don't need this huge government. I don't want a huge government. Leave me the fuck alone. Let me live my life. Let me take care of my family. Let me teach my family the values that I want to teach my family. That is not the place of the government.
Yeah.
So that's my macro. My micro is I want a society that is safe. I think that law and order needs reform, but I think it's really important. I was very upset by this whole defund the police movement. I think it's absolutely ridiculously stupid. You need law and order. If you have ever been a victim of a crime, you know that. It's really easy for people that are in La Jolla in a gated community to say defund the police. You're not living in it. So your opinion is a little bit irrelevant in my opinion. I also think that a lot of taxation is theft. I think that the government wastes our money. And I think that we all work really, really hard every day to make a living, and then you're taking half of it. And I wouldn't mind if you're taking half of it and you're doing something good with it, but you're taking half of it and you're wasting it. And that is theft. Do I think that we should be supporting these proxy wars like Ukraine? Absolutely not. I think it's a legitimate like money laundering Ponzi scheme. And I will stand by that. And I'm happy to have a full conversation about why we enter those wars and why we prop up the military industrial complex and who really makes money off of those things. I think that you send innocent young men to die over things that they shouldn't be fighting over and that don't need to have loss of life. I sit on the board of Active Valor, which we help Gold Star families. We watch the weapons of mass destruction bullshit that was fed to this country and everyone bought on. I think that that kind of stuff happens all the time. I think that our government's gotten so big that you have these ABC agencies that have so much power that they've done a lot of real shady stuff in the United States and around the world. And I think that needs to stop. I am a big believer in freedom. I want free choice. When you use the word mandate to me, I'm going to have a problem with it. Like that's where I started to get really upset during the pandemic is when they started
Governor Newsom,
when they started to use that, I'm like, absolutely not. That's my line in my sand. Like I'll go to war over that. Like this is my life, my body. I'm going to live how I want to live.
Ready to crack open the tea caskets.
Let's go. Like, I will deal with the consequences. And that's when I started talking a lot of shit on Instagram was my friends who own gyms were getting their gyms shut down.
Oh yeah, gym owners got their asses kicked.
And then the sheriffs were showing up, and I had friends that were like, no, we're going to stay open because I'm not going to lose everything I've ever worked for. And they were giving these guys misdemeanors. And I'm like, you're going to make an honest business owner a criminal. So my office started defending all of them for free, and we were fighting all of the misdemeanors, and we filed a federal lawsuit in federal court to try to keep all the gyms open. And that was just my stand. And then I realized like, I'm going to lose business. I'm going to lose people that disagree with me. I was getting death threats.
Sometimes it's worth it though.
100%. When I am on my deathbed and I look back, I'm going to go, I stood up for the things I believed in, for the people that I believed in, and for the life that I want to live. And if I lose some money over it, so be it. And I'm totally fine with it.
Sorry, I don't mean to add a levity to what you just said, which was a very seriously good point. But something you said earlier, I was thinking when you're talking about like taxation being theft. I was joking to my brother the other day after I got my federal tax quarterly estimate in the mail a couple days ago. I was joking to him that I converted to being a full-fledged MAGA supporter. But just joking. It's a joke. Now I have to add disclaimers to everything apparently. But,
I saw the red hat in his car, everyone, when he pulled out.
Yeah, okay, you got me, guys. Anyways, but on a serious note, there's so much to extrapolate from what you said, and I wish we had like 3 hours to do this. But like a couple things. One is, although I hope this isn't getting too off topic, because I know this is supposed to be like we're talking about like law and stuff related to law, but something you said that I just couldn't help like digging into was the point that you made about like proxy wars, actually. So, and the reason why I'm talking about that is because it's really relevant. Thousands of people are dying a day over there, and like we're involved in it, whether we want it to be or not. Like we are as a nation, as people involved in that conflict. But I was thinking about stories that I heard from Ukraine. I was thinking about stories of soldiers digging trenches, preparing for the Russian onslaught, or if you're Russian, I guess preparing for the Ukrainian counter onslaught, and finding the bones and weapons of World War II soldiers that had died 60, 80, or not 60, like 80 years plus beforehand, Nazis and Soviets. And I felt like there was a deep irony in that, like sort of like us, like, as we're creating these new conflicts, creating these new proxy wars, these new, and there's legitimate things on both sides, I believe, to a certain extent. And I hope I don't get canceled for saying that, but I just feel like there's a deep irony in like we're like the idea of repeating the mistakes of our forefathers, and we're actually being shown the physical proof of that. Like I was watching these YouTube videos, I was binging the other day of like these Ukrainian soldiers like digging up like and finding like Nazi relics and bones and stuff, and I was thinking like, man, like did we actually learn anything after like the catastrophe that was the first 50 years of the 20th century? And I feel like that is relevant to what we're talking about, because it touches upon like sort of the value system, right? That you sort of the case that you just presented so eloquently in the last 5 minutes. But yeah, I mean, can you speak to that in terms of just like this idea of like lessons from history and like failure to learn from that?
So it's rinse, repeat. But once you look at it as a business model, because that's what it is, it's a business model. And it's been a business model since World War I. And what it is these big world banks loan money to governments to fight these wars, and then they get paid back with interest and they make money. So guess who's behind most of these big wars? Big world banks. People don't realize World War II. This is one of my favorite examples because people have no idea, but it's Googleable, and a lot of stuff is not because a lot of stuff gets hidden. Prescott Bush, so George Herbert Walker's father, right?
Yeah, okay.
So grandfather
Bush. Of the
granddaddy
Bush that we all know
yeah.
and hate. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He was funding the Nazi Party.
I didn't know that.
American, right? American businessman, oil tycoon was funding the Nazi Party. A lot of American elite business people were funding the Nazis. Henry Ford, Googleable as well, got the highest Nazi honor, and I think it was like 40 or 39. It was maybe 41, but it was like a year before the war started. What do you think all of those German tanks ran off of? Standard Oil. Like, that's how this game works. These rich elite men have no problem sending pawns of people to slaughter because they make money and control, and that's how that it works. And that's how it's always worked. And a lot of these elite men and these elite families run these ABC, CIA type of agencies, and that's what they use is their like hand to be able to manipulate things and to be able to get us into these situations. And that's what Ukraine is as well. Zelensky was a literal actor, a literal comedic actor that the United States and the CIA created a coup, took over the government, put him in place, and then created a proxy war that we can shovel out billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money that then goes back into Raytheons and Northrop Grumman's, all those, big, whatever you want to call them, war companies. And guess what? That money then flows back down into Congress, into the Senate, and into lobbyists, and it's just a big business, and that's what it is. And it's not about, we care about Ukraine and the citizens. There's plenty of countries where citizens are treated way worse than how they're treated in Ukraine.
Yeah.
There's plenty of way worse situations than that, but that's a place that we can make money, and that's what we do. Yeah. And people don't want to look at it. People want to look at it as the United States is always the good guy. No, it's not the fucking way it works.
Yeah.
It's not the way that it works. But guess what?
We're positioned to think that way.
We're positioned to think that way. We're taught to think that way. We think that we only do good and they're all bad. Yeah. But that's not the reality of life. And the truest shit is the victor writes history. The victor is the one that tells you how it went down, but that doesn't mean that that's actually what went down.
Yeah.
And people don't have the ability to go, oh, that's not what I read when I was in school. I'm like, thanks. Like that's not being analytical. That's not like actually digging into something and letting your brain work for you. That's just eating the shit that they feed you, and that's a problem.
Well, and I was thinking too, like if not that we're gonna do a whole history lesson in the last few minutes, but just like going even further back to like. I was thinking about like the First World War, and with the aristocracy sending all these like 18 and 19-year-olds to die in droves for a war that I feel like by the end, in my opinion, like a lot of these soldiers who were being conscripted didn't even had no idea what it was really about.
No idea.
And they were just going to be killed like instantly in these suicide charges essentially in trench warfare. But
for sure.
But I was thinking about like, okay, like have we really even moved beyond that? Because, okay, you're saying, we don't have an aristocracy anymore, someone might say. It's like, but we have something different. We have what you talked about, like the world banks, but we also have the military-industrial complex.
100%.
We all have other like powerful moneyed interests that are maybe better cloaked now and not more explicitly in the seat of power, but are essentially repeating, recycling the same thing.
It's just evolved.
And so what I'm wondering is, not just to be like kind of doom and gloom naysayers, like is there like an actual movement like that's pushing back against this? What is it like? Where can I sign up? Like what's the story on that right now? Or is this just something that we're beginning to like be really conscious of right now?
I think that we're in the beginning of an awakening as a society, and I think more people wake up to it every single day. I woke up to it. Funny story, and it's funny because you introduced this by saying the family that we all love to hate, because it's true. But I remember in like 2018, I said this to a buddy, and I was like, well, yeah, the Bush family, like Bush Sr. was a great guy. And he was like, a great guy? Like, what are you talking? What are you even saying? Like, he was one of the worst men to walk the face of the earth. And he was like, read this book. And it's called Family of Secrets by Russell Baker. And it is fucking phenomenal. Like, and it is so well sourced. It's none of this like, well, maybe not. No. And it walks you through the whole background of Prescott Bush, of Bush Sr. as a CIA agent, of Bush Sr. very likely involved with the JFK assassination, and all of this shady shit. And you just realize the picture that we have painted for us of these families is complete shit. It's just not the case. It's not the reality. You can go through the Clintons, you can go through the Bushes, but I think the more people start to wake up to it, I think that people are going, okay, we need to take our power back. And the power truly is with the people. They don't want you to think that. They don't want you to think that the people can come together and go, nope, we're going to do it a different way. Nope, we're going to say no to this. But we can, and it doesn't take everyone. So the more people that wake up to it, the more people that see that we're playing a game that we're the ones that always lose, it will change. Yeah. I just hope that it changes sooner than later. Yeah. And I don't know what that speed is.
But, and just to be clear, like your argument is not that, if we were just to kind of remove or sort of like, not eliminate, that's a bad word, but to sort of deal with like a few specific like people. But for you, it's bigger than that. It's like, it's very structural, right? It's like these world banks, these organizations have been doing this for decades or centuries. And like, it's very structural problems, but you are confident they can be addressed within the parameters of our current democracy.
Yes. But it is up to the people. It's not going to be a Trump. It's not going to be an RFK. It's going to be the people that take back power. Back in the day, when you would have ruling classes that would get too powerful and they'd starve the people and the peasants, the people would eventually uprise and they'd storm the castle, right? And they'd kill the elite family in front of the castle. Well, the elites figured out, okay, this happens. This is the ebb and flow of society. Yeah. What can we do to make it where they're not ever storming the castle gates? What can we do to make sure that we can retain this control? So they put in power structures and control structures throughout history, and that's where the bread and circuses come from. That's where the divide and conquer comes from. Those things are all done to keep us all distracted, where we're just all running around on the hamster wheel, and we don't have time to go, oh, fuck, the real problem's the castle.
Yeah.
And once more people wake up to that, once more people, and I'm not advocating to storm the castle gate.
Yeah,
right?
Like,
that's not
what
what I'm saying.
The Bolsheviks about to kill the Romanov family. That's not what you're saying at all.
I'm not trying to get a sense. But what I'm saying is, once people realize that the true power in this country lies in the masses and in the people, and once we can come together and stop fighting each other over Trump Harris and realize, no, we're the real victims, the people, then things will change.
And last question on that topic is just like, do you believe that those changes can realistically be achieved within the two-party system that I think we both agree is not only problematic, but like structurally disadvantageous to democracy? Or do you believe that maybe that has to be one of those things that comes first, where either we just dismantle that and or like have a third party that's actually viable, that people actually vote for, implement something like ranked choice voting, which I would love to do a whole podcast about someday. But do you believe that something like that is like necessary first, or you think it's reasonable to work within the two-party system?
No, the two-party system is broken. It's been broken. It is an illusion of choice. That's what I think. Okay. I watched a really good podcast on it this week, and he basically call it like a magician's choice, right? Like you think you have a choice, but no. They want it where once you come out of the primary system, either one of those two candidates are acceptable for the ruling class, right? So they're not going to lose one way or the other. Whoever it is, they got control over them. They're going to be able to manage them. That's not true democratic choice power of the people. We need more than a two-party system. We need real choices.
Yeah, and I think this applies to both parties to some extent, but like this idea that we've moved beyond like the smoking rooms before where these candidates were selected, I don't think we really have. I think they're just hiding it a lot better.
1,000%.
And so like, again, like this illusion of choice idea and like these third party or even these candidates who are Democrat or Republican, but don't really get a lot of attention because they're not as easily sensationalized. Like I feel like those people would have a chance, would be viable if we were to just make those kind of modifications that you're talking about.
Look at RFK. Look at RFK. You can't tell me that RFK was a better candidate than Joe Biden? But they didn't let him into that game. He wasn't going to be allowed to play in that game. So we lost a choice, a potential. Like he's the one that I probably agree with the most. If you look at all the candidates that are out there, I like a lot of the things that he stands for, but they were never going to let us have that choice.
So just kind of to wrap that up and put a pin on it before we close, like, I mean, just moving forward, like awareness, like conversations like the ones we're having now and not just like, DM wars or Facebook thread wars, but like actually like real legitimate conversations. Like, how do you recommend, like if someone's listening to this, like, great, like, what do I do now with my, crazy uncle or like my crazy relative or my friend who seems like unreasonable about politics? Like practically, like how do you really approach these conversations in a way that's constructive? That's not like, oh, I'm right, gotcha, like one-liner, like people love doing nowadays, but like in a constructive like fashion. That's not about like winning, but that's about winning people. Like, how do you approach that?
So I have a lot of these conversations because I have a decent following on Instagram and I talk a lot of shit. So I have a lot of people that disagree with me, and I always try to be just very respectful with how I respond. Yeah. It's not about I'm right, you're right. Here's a different way to look at it. And you're not going to convince someone that doesn't want to be convinced. You're not going to be able to have a conversation with someone and have them open up to your side of things unless they're willing to learn and they're willing to look at it from a different angle. And so a lot of people come to me when they're ready and they go, hey, I thought you were crazy for 2 years and now I'm like, I see it. Where can I start? Where can I learn more? And so I have like a list of books that are like breadcrumbs, and I can kind of guide you on the journey just based on books. But it takes effort to be able to go and read these books. They're not like, a Goosebumps book that you can read in 30 minutes. Like, you're going to have to invest some time and you're going to have to sit there and read through some history. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. But the people that are, they'll call me and they'll be like, oh shit, I just got through this one. I can't believe I didn't know any of this. What's the next one? And they get really into it. Yeah. And once you start down that road, it doesn't take long. And some of my smartest friends are now like, I thought you were fucking crazy. And I get it now. Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And the world is forever different. And it's a gift and the curse. Yeah. It is a true gift and curse. I understand now more than ever that ignorance is bliss. Because once you know, you look at everything differently. You can't unknow. You can't not see it.
So that's great, and I realized that in the course of that conversation, which was awesome, by the way, like I did you a disservice in that we didn't talk about some of your other business enterprises, which I apologize, but I will ask one question.
This is great. I love this. This is what I'd rather talk about.
Yeah, no, me too, honestly. I mean, we do like these conversations about entrepreneurship and business, but I love having this dialogue too. So just one question about that, and then I'll let you go, is just with your different business and philanthropic endeavors, is there anything that's coming up like in the future you can point people to, maybe a new project? I know you've kind of sold some businesses, but a new philanthropic endeavor or a new project, or maybe something that's existing currently that you're planning on like scaling in some way that you're excited about that you can share with us?
Trying to think if I can share it. We have a very big opportunity with Dropkick that would change the entire company, and we're probably about 2 weeks away from being able to finalize that, and it would put us in one of the biggest venues in the country, and we'd be the exclusive coffee provider, and it would change the brand forever. So I'm really hoping that goes through. Fingers crossed. We'll know in the next couple weeks. For the law firm, I just opened up Escondido. I opened up Boise, Idaho 2 years ago, so I go back and forth. That is going to continue to grow. That's something that I have a lot of fun with, and just going to continue to do it until it's not fun. So just kind of keeping to do the same thing. But eventually I do want to be able to expand the dog rescue. I want to be able to have, if you will a brick and mortar location, probably more of like a property. I have a ranch out in El Cajon that I want to completely turn into like the dog rescue ranch, where I have a ton of dogs living out there. People can come visit. They can see the rescue experience. They can see what these dogs go through, have someone living out there to manage that. So in the next 10 years, I'd really like to be able to get that fully operational. So just some fun stuff like that.
All right. Well, hey, I'll let you go, but just wanted to say thanks again for the conversation.
Of course,
if you want to, if people want to check out like your website. So for Batta Fulkerson is it just battafulkerson.com?
Yeah. Battafulkerson.com, the Bulldog Lawyers. You can find us there. For Instagram, my shit talking is on Dan Fulkerson on Instagram. My non-shit talking, more of just like, business talk, stuff like that, is the Bulldog Lawyer. So either one. Check
them out, guys. And would love to have you on again sometime. But honestly, Dan, and I mean this when I say this, I really enjoyed this on a lot of levels. But I'll let you go today. But just thanks so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
This was absolutely kick-ass, and can't wait to do it again.
It's a pleasure, man.
Awesome.
It really was.
Thanks, Dan. All right.
Thank you.
That's a wrap, guys. This has been another recorded episode of Stay Classy Podcast with your host, Steve Wire. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, you can find all of our content at our website at stayclassypod.com. And thanks to our production sponsor and partner, MaxLux Media. You can find them at maxluxmedia.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Every subscription helps and goes a long way towards ensuring that we can continue to produce content for viewers like yourself. Thanks so much. Stay classy.